What's up, everybody? It's Alex from Heavy New York, calling from the quarantine zone again, and this time we got Alex of Voyager. Thank you so much for your time today, man. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
It's so awesome to have you here. As I told you before, Colors in the Sun was one of my personal favorites to come out in 2019 last year. One thing I was curious about is I want to know what the thought process was going into the making of this album. For you, were you just making a follow-up to Ghost Smile, or did you think that this was in a way like a new start for Voyager?
Yeah, I think we actually got. I can't remember exactly when it was in the piece where we got signed to Season of Mist Records, but basically we kind of just had to pull our socks up and get something ready to be released in probably the shortest period of time that we've ever had to do it before. Normally we just kind of take our time with the recording process and also the writing process. You know, we'll have started to write for the next album while we're touring the current album cycle, and with this one it's like, wow, we've actually now we're contractually obliged to release something, so why wait? Let's just do it. So we didn't. I guess the gestation period for the music was probably more aligned with an actual physical human embryo. You know, it's like 9 months, something like that of writing. Not so. Looking back, I don't think it was so intense. We can pretty much churn out stuff when we need to, thankfully. So, we just kind of smashed it out and got it ready to go.
That's awesome to hear. Is there ever a preconceived idea on how you want something to sound, or do you, or is there just kind of like a lot of improvising involved? Because I consider your music to be fairly experimental, so I don't know if you go into the studio knowing this is what we want to do, or if there's just a lot of things falling into place.
That's cool. It's interesting that you say that you're kind of perceiving it as being experimental, because I guess in my mind, like, I know how much experimenting goes into the music, because I'm there to experience it firsthand, right? But I think we kind of spend a couple of months on a few songs, and by the end of it, it's pretty. I'd say it's pretty concise. Everything that we want to say gets kind of said, and I wouldn't. I don't think there's too much room in Voyager songs to be extremely experimental in maybe a prog rock kind of way.
Yeah.
But no, I mean there's no real set kind of objective in the songwriting. The only other mission basically in writing the songs is to stay true to that Voyager sound, and we're aware that now all the Colors in the Sun is our 7th album, right? So we kind of know what we're doing to some extent, and we know that it was going to be a kind of like the previous album, Ghost Mile, to some extent, but we just kind of ran with it, and we know what works and what doesn't and what fits. So I can't say that it was wasn't really like a concept album where we set out to achieve a specific thing. We just kind of trusted in our experience, and also we trusted in the chemistry between each member, and we knew that it was going to come together in a particular way. And I think once you write a few songs, you then start to get a general idea about what the album is going to sound like and what the vibe is going to be.
Yeah. Well, I guess I use the term experimental just because with Colors in the Sun, I felt many different emotional vibes behind it. Like, I thought Bright Star, that had a very optimistic feel behind it. I thought Entropy had a little bit of mystery behind it, and then reconnected with those riffs that just kick in. I mean, that hit me like a punch in the face in a good way.
Awesome.
So I thought maybe because there was many different emotions throughout this record that maybe, like, were you representing a certain feeling you were feeling at this particular time, or was there just kind of like an underlying feeling during the making of the entirety of this album?
I think definitely, if not subconsciously, there was definitely around that period, last year and the year before, Stranger Things was making a huge kind of ripple in the entertainment industry, and that whole kind of psytrance, or maybe not psytrance, like synthwave. Like that synthwave kind of vibe was getting a lot of traction and everyone kind of really enjoyed that kind of nostalgic 80s synth kind of vibe. And that I think that probably translated, maybe one of the biggest things that translated into that album was that kind of synth heavy appreciation. And like, you can go back on our discography and you can hear back on the very first album that we've kind of been doing that since day one. Danny is the singer of the band, but he's also the keyboard player, or the pianist, whatever you want to call him. Experimenting with layers and a lot of dance music influenced stuff. So it just kind of made sense for a band like Voyager to really embrace that 80s vibe in particular. I think it worked out. We just kind of tried to play to that atmospheric and the 80s synth style mixed with the really super syncopated rhythmic stuff and as much melody as possible. And then we try to jam that into what might be closely associated with something like a pop structure.
Yeah, I don't necessarily.
Music structure.
Oh yeah, sorry. I don't necessarily would say that, like, I mean, I loved the riffs on here, and this had maybe like an essence of darkness that I identified with. But I almost feel like, especially with this album, you don't necessarily need to be a metal fan to really appreciate it. I mean, I've showed this, the majority of people I show this record to, like, listen to Depeche Mode. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's awesome. Honestly, like, all of us are musicians first, right? And we all kind of came together because we shared the love for metal. And this is like, kind of looking back, when I'm growing up and when I'm a teenager, and I'm just so obsessed with like Opeth and Metallica and Pantera in the earlier days, and you kind of just get heavier and heavier and heavier as time goes on. And I remember thinking, I was finding it trying to, like, kind of hard to reconcile with the fact that I was so about metal, but I still loved every music so much music that wasn't metal. And I had to kind of draw a line in the sand for myself, I guess, and say, listen, I'm not living my life because I'm a metalhead. I'm actually living my life as a musician. So that really enabled me, and I guess probably the other members of the band as well, to really realize that we're in this for music, not so much metal per se. So it allows you freedom and kind of the permission to do things, to give musical license to stuff that a metalhead perhaps wouldn't. And I'm really proud of that. I think that Voyager is definitely a guilty pleasure for a lot of straight up metalheads. But we were a finalist in Australia Decides Eurovision. We were shortlisted. We were maybe number 12 out of the top 10 for Australia Decides Eurovision. So, a track off that album, that was I can't remember. Oh god, off the top of my head, I can't remember what track it was. Was it
Secondary?
Or I think it was. I'm so bad with track names. But anyway, one of the songs was almost going to be represented as Australia's induction into the Eurovision Song Contest, which is just unheard of for metal bands. So,
yeah.
Unless you're Lordi, I guess.
Yeah. Going back, you said a term that really just opened my whole perception on this album even further, and that's freedom, because your music's so technically impressive, and to execute that technical ability, you kind of have to be rather like concrete, you have to be focused. But really, when I listen to this album, I see an essence of freedom. I'm not sure if it's the vocal range on here or the way that this record moves, but like, I feel like that there is a lot of freedom on here. I almost feel like Colors in the Sun is kind of representative. Is it fair to say that when you look at the entirety of the Voyager catalog, from I Am the Revolution to 5 to Go Smile, like, is it almost kind of like representative of who you guys are at that particular time? Is it almost kind of like a self-portrait?
It is, absolutely. Yeah, I actually, some memories came up on my Facebook a little while ago of the kind of behind-the-scenes filming of the video clip we did for a song called Lost. And that was from What was that from? That was from I'm the Revolution, which was released or around 2011, I think.
9.
2009, was it? Oh my God, yeah. So there you go. So we, there's pictures of me and stuff, and I've got, like close to waist length long hair, and I've got these huge goth, like knee-high boots with like massive buckles on them and chains and shit hanging off me, and it's like I look at those photos, I'm like, wow, it's just, I was very, very young back then, and it's a snapshot in time, which is so cool. But the one thing that's kind of carried us through in each of these albums, that at the time we were doing it with pure intentions, and we were being true to who we were at that time. And when you look back on some of the stuff, it's kind of like, oh God, you kind of like cringe a little bit at what you were wearing, or maybe you remember what you were into at the time, or maybe what your worldview was. And it's kind of only natural, but at least you were being true to yourself. And each subsequent album, especially with the current lineup that we've got, I think that's kind of been there since the V or the 5 album, when Ashley was the last one to join, which was, I think, about 8 years ago now, some time ago.
Wow.
That's before that, every album had different member lineup. By one person. There was one different person in each time. But now we've had this solid lineup. Everyone knows what the other person's about, and we know what we're about collectively, and it gives you that freedom. I don't have to pretend to be someone that I'm not to impress the singer of my band, and vice versa. So that freedom really allows music to pour out of a musician in a really pure way, and a way that it should be, at least to create the purest piece of art that you can, the one with the best intentions.
Yeah, I guess the best way to describe it is like you guys are very polished in your sound, but very raw with your emotion and your energy. Yeah,
and funnily enough, have you ever seen us live before?
I haven't. Have you guys ever come to the States?
Yeah, we've toured a few times, and we've played in New York as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we actually, our very first show in America was in Brooklyn at this tiny little place. Yeah, it was down the road from St. Vitus. I remember that. Anyway, it was like capacity of 50 people, but I'll never forget that. That was amazing. But a lot of people note that when we play on stages, the consistent thing that people say to us is that we look like we're having fun on stage. And really we are. We're really, really enjoying ourselves live. And we don't take ourselves too seriously, but we take the music very seriously. And that's one difference. We can just be who we are to each other. But when it comes to the music, we can be very focused, but we'll just perform it with a giant cheesy grin on our face most of the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have to. If you're not having fun and you're not enjoying it, what the hell is the point? You know what I mean? And that led me into my next question, actually, because is there maybe a similar creative energy into your live performances as you are when you're songwriting, or is playing live and songwriting a completely separate art?
I feel they're quite they're quite separate in terms of vibe and energy. I mean, you got to think as well. Like, we all work jobs and stuff, and we always have. So when we get to meet up in the jam room, there's normally a lot of stuff on our minds outside of that. So when we try and get in the jam room, we might be in, it's not that, I don't know. I feel like from an outsider's perspective, Voyager can seem quite juvenile when we're in the same room together, just because we're kind of like, it feels like you're just hanging out with your mates as a teenager. So there's that need for us to really kind of reel it in sometimes and knuckle down on writing the music. But when we're performing the music, no, I mean, you kind of, by that point when we're performing it, there's no nerves about whether we can or can't, like we can or can't do it. It's just the nerves of Actually, no, just the freedom of performing it. We always make sure that we're practiced and polished for the most part. So we just kind of, it's kind of almost muscle memory when we play it. What we'd have to focus on is actually having fun. And, sometimes that can be easy to do. Other times it can be a little bit harder to do, whether you're, when you're on tour and you're in the third week and, you're homesick and you've had next to no sleep, but at the end of the day, you're still performing music you've written, and there's almost nothing better than that, I think.
Yeah. Well, the funniest thing is like, let's say, and if you do this, I'd be amazed, but like, if you do this maybe on your next tour where you play Colors in the Sun in its entirety, and then to play like Sever Romance and then play Entropy, followed up by Reconnected, and then go to Sign of the Times right afterwards, like 1 minute there'll be people crowd killing, then the next minute there'll be people like waving lighters in the air and crying.
Yeah.
Like I almost feel like you could get any type of interaction or reaction out of the audience that you're playing in front of.
Yeah, I mean that would be awesome. I would love to do that, and I've wanted to do that for a good while. The problem is normally we have to represent at least a couple of tracks from each album, and being 7 albums deep now, it's hard to please everyone. So that would be really fun. You make me think about all those different vibes that you can kind of get from that one album. And it makes me think about our actual fan base. It's so varied. We've honestly got people of of all types that listen to our music, which is really quite cool. I think we can kind of appeal to a pretty broad audience.
Definitely. I think the best way to describe it is you could be like somebody's gateway drug into heavier music, but I think you could be like a metal elitist who would be too scared to like step outside of their darkness. I think you could be somebody's gateway into the darkness, and you could be somebody's gateway into the light as well.
That's really cool. Yeah, I mean, we'd love that. It's pretty funny, people's reaction to our music sometimes. Sometimes people can be just, exactly like, they're really open-minded about it. Other times, we might be that guilty pleasure that the black metal elitist might secretly listen to in the car. And whatever works. If you derive any kind of emotion from it, which is awesome. Actually, kind of like a discussion in the band is like, we hope that it's not just like you're okay. Would much rather either be like, this is fucking awesome, or this fucking sucks. At least we're kind of, eliciting some kind of emotion from the listener rather than just complete apathy.
Yeah, and I just got to ask, too, because you're on a record label now, Season of Mist, and huge shout-out to everybody there. Like, you're on a label with, like, Gorguts and Archspire and, like, Gal from Gorgoroth and, like, so many, like, black metal bands.
Abath, yeah.
Abath, like, 1349.
Abath.
Like, I think the best thing is you're also kind of like a standout in your label as well.
Yeah. Side note, I've just discovered Archspire, not 3 days ago.
How
I don't know if you're
amazing
into them, dude. I was going for a jog, and I was putting on. I was listening to Epitaph by Necrophagist.
Oh yeah.
And it's been. I mean, I listened to that album when it came out. I was in high school, and I thought, this is the most amazing tech death ever. Aside from Tasmania's own Psychroptic. But I was cranking that, and then eventually Spotify just kind of like went into its own death metal spin, right? And then that track off Archspire's latest album came on, and I was like, holy shit. I hadn't heard anything like it before.
It's absurd, that 5 humans made that to me. It's just amazing.
Human Murmuration. I think that was the track 2 from
and
Relentless Mutation.
And somebody made a classical music rendition of that track on piano.
Did they really? Oh wow, I gotta check that. I was like, do you know when I gotta say about as someone that plays just loads of music and has for 20 years now, it's actually kind of hard to get impressed and wowed by stuff now. And when I was writing and I was listening to that, it made me smile. I was like, this is it's so funny. It was funny to hear how ridiculously like technical, fast, and also just creative it was. And I've just been cranking it ever since. And it's just it was really cool. It just really it reminded me of how much I love kind of like technical death metal in that way. That's a side note. But yeah, I looked them up and I was like, holy shit, we're label mates. That's wicked. That was really cool. Anyway, sorry, what was the question?
No, we were just going off, and I think that's awesome. And and on top of that, another thing you need to know about Archspire is that they are the funniest human beings you will ever meet in your life. I've interviewed them 3 times, and they're just
wicked.
They are the funniest. Like, you would think that with a band that technically impressive, they would be, rather serious and focused. That band just does not take themselves seriously as humans, and I love it. Like, that is a band you need to see. That's the band of the modern times you need to see now.
Yeah, I think so. I kind of watched their read mean comments or something on YouTube, and we can definitely I could totally see Voyager and them just kind of hanging out and shooting the shit and getting along, because they seem like they've got the same sense of humor as we did.
Yeah.
I think they read out one mean comment where someone was roasting them as a band on a video that they had put out themselves of them shredding. It was like a shreds video. And in Voyager, we just love shred videos. Like, Creed shreds is a massive kind of in-joke for the band. And I watched it, I was like, oh, it's hilarious. But the fact that someone's ripping on them, being the fastest band of all time is bullshit. They suck. And
have fun in your mom's basement.
Yeah, it makes you realize, as an outsider, you think, all the cool kind of death metal kids, no, they're kind of infallible to kind of like shit posting, and seeing them, it's like, wow, you could put out the most brutal, original, kind of creative death metal album, in ages, and you still get roasted. There's always some keyboard warrior that's like, this is fucking shit, or it's not heavy enough, or it's not fast enough, or it's too fast. So it's just
they're like Goldilocks. They're like Goldilocks.
I know, right? Yeah.
Yeah, too fast, too slow, whatever.
It's too fast. Yeah.
Back to the songwriting process for Voyager, though. You ready for the most difficult question of the whole interview?
Sure, fire away.
How do you know when a song is done?
That's a good one. You know what? Deadlines.
Oh, come on, that's too easy.
The deadline makes it done. Do you know what, this is funny because I'm in the process of doing a solo EP, right? And I say that, and the first song that I wrote for it is coming up on 10 years old. I wrote it on Christmas Eve in Scotland, of all places, in 2010. And I was like, my God, why is it taking me so long to do this? And it's just, I have had zero deadline. I'm just like, yeah, I've got this idea about what my EP is going to be like, and I don't even know what it's actually going to sound like because I haven't recorded all the parts yet. I'm closing in on the end of it, but that's 10 years. 10 years of constantly and then writing other songs and just taking time with it. With this Voyager, this last album, it's like, well, shit, this needs to be done. So unless you've got any other ideas, it's done. I think as far as Voyager's concerned, we've got that deadline. All 5 of us can say, yeah, we're really happy with that. But a lot of times what happens is we would have recorded all our parts and we're hearing the mix revisions back, and Danny's added some extra stuff in on the keyboards or some atmospheric stuff, and we haven't heard it before. Or maybe it's been there, but just by virtue of playing all this music super loud in a jam room, you haven't really picked up on tiny little bits, and you hear it and it's like, wow, that's really cool. Only sometimes you hear it and you're like, no, I can't have that, and someone's got to really just put their vote in, I strongly advise we don't put this in. But I think the deadline is how you get shit done.
Yeah, I guess it gives you that extra pressure spark to do it done, get it done, but also get it done right.
Yeah. Well, you're putting someone, like, you're putting a musician who's like the most flaky human being of all time, and has got their ego so wrapped up in everything that you're like, even when it is done right, like, even listen back to some of our recordings, I'm like, oh, I wish we'd done that, or I wish the production was this way. Like, if you don't stop, if you don't force yourself to stop, it'll just keep going and going and going, and it will never see the light of day. No one will be able to do that, so.
Well, thank goodness for your deadlines, because I feel like with every song on this album, especially even with the shorter ones, like a song like Now or Never or something, if you were just one note over or one note under, like that, I think it wouldn't have been as strong as it was. And especially with, like, I love the intro to Saccharine Dream and the way that Sever Romance has like that kind of slower, more tempo part before building up. I think you guys nailed it to a head structurally. So if the deadline was playing a role in that, God bless it.
Oh, legend. Thanks so much, Alex. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, those little tracks, they just kind of, they're actually kind of in keeping with the rest of the discography. Even from the very first album, Element V, there was these tiny little kind of tracks in between that just kind of lead the listener into the next kind of song after it. So I like that we still do it. That's totally Danny's thing. We have the rest of the band really don't have anything to do with those transitionary tracks. So Danny does really well.
You should do a set list where you play only those transition or interlude tracks. See how the audience will react to that.
Honestly, well, some of my favorite Voyager songs are those ones. The second album, Universe, has a couple of songs that don't even feature the band. They're just kind of Danny. Like, there's a song called Garden of Love and Between the Sheets. Yeah, and they're like two of my favorite songs. And it's just kind of Danny. Maybe it's just a Danny solo thing. But I really dig them, and it gives the listener a little bit of a different flavor. But even I think there's been times where I'm like, we need to stretch this song out because it's awesome. I think, what's the song off Ghost Mile? The This Gentle Earth. That was originally going to be one of those transition songs, and I had to campaign for it. It's like, no, let me put bass to it. Let's do get some drums in there, and eventually we got it out to a bit longer a song, which I was happy about.
Yeah, isn't that amazing about songwriting? There's so many things that are supposed to go one way and end up doing it in a completely different direction.
Yeah, and it's amazing, and the thing is, it's like when you've got 5 individuals in a band and someone brings something to it, and if Scott brings a riff or Danny brings some kind of like half-baked song or riffs or something into the jam room, and it will prick the ears of someone else, and they'll be like, yes, let's do that. And then you've got this instant kind of injection of enthusiasm into something that might ordinarily just be overlooked, or I've got this riff, yeah, whatever, it's the throwaway thing, and you just need someone else to just take it to that next place, and then the snowball effect happens, and that's when it's really cool to be in a band. You're like, everyone's just firing on all cylinders, and everyone's just stoked to be in the room and feel this stuff come alive. You're pulling it out of the ether, riffs and music, and then you can turn that into a vibe and condense it into a recording that someone can listen to when they're driving to work, or when they're on the train or the subway, as maybe you travel on, whatever. If we can kind of create that aura or experience, I mean, that's what us as listeners enjoy. Yeah. So if we can create that for someone else, that's a huge deal.
Yeah. And I don't know if this is the most appropriate question to ask you specifically, but has there ever been a time where maybe a concept or a story or even lyrics could determine maybe the arrangement of the composition?
Oh, just from a lyrical standpoint?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I think when we're all in the room, it's mainly just the structural stuff that we have a hand in. Yeah, like Danny, the vocalist, I think he's a great lyricist. You know, he'll write stuff and just, you know, you can kind of see him in the corner working away, but kind of the rest of us are focused on riffing. And you know, Ash looks like you know, Animal from the Muppets, so he's like an octopus behind his drum kit. He's kind of focused on that. I'm just trying to be, you know, like Les Claypool or something on my bass, and you know, so it can kind of. I don't think there's too much that goes into it vocally that maybe changes the structure. But I mean, you might have to ask Danny that one time when you interview him.
Yeah, I was always curious because I was always like a fan of like the story behind the album, and that I was like wondering like, oh, maybe were the lyrics maybe did that influence the musicianship in a way?
Yeah, I mean, I think it possibly does, but maybe unbeknownst to the rest of the band. Mm-hmm. You know, it might be. I think Danny, he's the longest. Well, he kind of formed the band, right? So we kind of entrust the lyrical elements to him. No one's really felt the need to kind of pitch in for that kind of thing. So I don't know whether, I think his writing is always quite introspective, and so it always takes on that kind of dark vibe no matter what we do, really.
Mm-hmm.
Which is cool. But I know that knowing his influences, and you know, Typo Negative being one of those major influences, and also for myself, I know that I kind of can tell where it's going to go. You know, it'll always be kind of like a dark, sometimes romantic, sometimes introspective, and only I think maybe only one of us will pitch in if we think something sounds a bit poxy. You know, if he's like, oh, he'll give us an album title, or maybe not an album title, like a song title, and we're like, nah, that's a bit naff, and we're like, really? You sure? And we're like, yeah. What about you change it to this? And you know, it goes that way.
Yeah, I definitely see a lot of Typo Negative in the Voyager DNA. So.
Oh, dude, big time.
Yeah.
We did a tribute song for him on the Meaning of I album. It's called Iron Dream.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know if you've heard it, but you should check it out, man.
I haven't, but I didn't know it was a tribute to Peter.
Yeah, big time. Yep. That's one of my favorites. It's Typo through and through, really. Even the bass tone, I just tried to you know, I've got there's loads of distortion and chorus all over it, and actually that was the big thing, like right the kind of the height of me getting into Typo Negative is when we played in Brooklyn, and I met a few people, and actually I was a big fan of Daylight Dies.
Oh, great.
Which you might know, and this is going back to 2011.
Okay, I was still in high school, so.
All right, yeah. So I think I reached out to Jesse, who's the drummer from Daylight Dies, and he actually lived in New York at the time, and I was like, man, it would be awesome to meet you. And huge fan of his band, you know, and I'm pretty sure Lost the Living, I think that's their second album. Pretty sure it's their second album. That had come out, and that was on heavy rotation. That and Typo Negative was just listening to constantly. And he's like, you know, he introduced me to a couple of people that met Peter Steele, and obviously, like, you know, he was a big fan of like Duff's and CBGBs and all the rest. So I get to like kind of chat to a few people that had some personal stories about Peter Steele, and it just rocked my world. Hey, I was going into playing in New York for the very first time was so surreal, because you got to understand that as an Australian, we've been fed so much American TV, right? So I came to realize, in my mind, I imagine New York as being something kind of like the old, like the 80s Superman movies.
Mm-hmm.
With Christopher Reeves. I think that's in Metropolis, isn't it? Yeah, but it's like that and Law and Order. The opening sequence of Law and Order and Law and Order SVU, and I was like, wow, it's going to be so grimy and grim, and like, there's so much vibe to it. And I got there and I was like, wow, this feels like a really safe city, and I was just kind of like a tourist, just it's like I'm totally safe in any place, and it was all fine. But I was like heavily into October Rust at that time, and man, it was such a cool, an awesome moment in touring life to be able to play music.
Definitely.
In typo negative land,
Yeah, of course. And finally, the final question I wanted to ask you is, and you let it in perfectly actually, is coming from Australia. I just interviewed Caligula's Horse last week, and they actually gave you guys a huge shout out. So shout out back to Caligula's Horse.
Nice, shout out, boys. Yep.
And but I feel like Australia now has been. There's two subgenres I know that are doing pretty well down there. There's like metalcore bands with like Thy Art Is Murder and Parkway Drive and Polaris and whatnot, but then there's like I think Prague is also doing very well with you guys and Caligula's Horse and Neobliviscaris and bands like that. Like in your region of Australia, is there kind of like a scene that you're involved in at the moment, or do you prefer to play outside of your hometown a little bit more?
Yeah, there always was. I mean, probably not for a good while now. Because we kind of focus our efforts internationally now. There was definitely a huge, like, it's kind of a weird thing, to be honest, because like there was always a really really dedicated Perth metal scene for many years, like maybe from kind of the mid 90s up until maybe like kind of 2000 and I want to say like 2010 maybe, and I don't know, just like it definitely petered out. Like I grew up in that scene, even as like I'd go to underage gigs and just consume as much metal as I could. And I met a lot of my friends from that scene, and kind of I was so heavily involved with it. And then it just kind of like venues started to stop playing metal. It kind of dropped off. Actually, from my own perspective, I was focused on touring a lot, so and I started to play music myself, doing like covers to earn money and stuff. So I was like, the last thing I want to do is go to another live show, because I'm just always playing live shows. But I think the Brisbane kind of metal scene is always good, but I think it kind of depends on what kind of a band you are, because if you're in a black metal band, there's definitely a strong underground scene. I think same as the metalcore. Yeah, the metalcore ones, they're huge. They're more popular. But Voyager was definitely forged in the Perth metal scene in its formative years, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, and kind of like you mentioned metalcore is huge. I think it's fair to say Parkway Drive is probably like the biggest band out of Australia at the moment right now.
Yeah, Parkway Drive. There's North Lane and Make Them Suffer.
Yeah, I just interviewed Make Them Suffer a couple weeks ago as well.
Oh, cool. Yeah, they're from Perth. Them, and I guess I'm not so much into that style. I feel like I'm a bit old school for it, in some weird way. But yeah, like actually, no, North Lane's, I think their latest album came out, and that was really cool. I gave that a listen. Yeah, but Make Them Suffer have been going for ages as well. You got like, the funny thing is all these bands that are big now and stuff, we've played gigs with all of them, or pretty much.
Probably when it was only clubs, right?
We've known them, yeah, we've known them from the scene. Carnival is also another huge band from Perth. They've been going for ages as well. Perth is really, dude, Tame Impala are from Perth. And they're maybe one of the biggest kind of, what are they? They kind of pop, I don't know what they are anymore. They're huge, you're headlining Glastonbury and stuff. It's like, and on all the late shows in the States, that's crazy.
Yeah, I've been calling Australia the Sweden of the Pacific at this point because of how many great bands are out there. So
yeah, I know. Do you I mean, for the longest time, Sweden was just on top of the metal game, right? It's like you came from Sweden and you could do no wrong.
Yeah. Now it's like that for Australia.
Yeah, and honestly, it's kind of strange. I mean, like growing up, we had loads of really good, even local bands. That you're like, man, this is so good. Like, there's a band called Pathogen, who actually the guitar the main guy behind Pathogen is our touring sound guy, Aidan Barton. You know, they're a huge. They did really well. There's Vespers Descent. Oh god, there's actually too many bands to name, but they're all such high quality. And I think we were, because all these people grew up and idolized this Swedish, especially the Gothenburg kind of sound. Excuse me. Everyone was listening to that constantly, and that's what we're trying to copy. So we just got good at it, I think. Also, for the longest time, no one would really come to Perth to tour. It would be a really hard job to see your favorite metal band tour Perth because it's just too expensive. There wasn't enough people there. It wasn't worth it for a lot of bands coming from Europe.
Mm-hmm.
But that's awesome. I mean, like, yeah, we get asked that question a lot, actually. It's kind of like Australia is now the prog metal kind of epicenter of the world somehow.
Yeah, which I think is amazing. And keep up the good work, too.
Thanks. Yeah, look, I haven't actually seen the Voyager members for, geez, a good couple of months now because of old mate COVID-19.
Yep.
Our drummer Ashley, he's been down south of the city. He's been stuck down there. Not allowed to come back home because of the border closures and stuff, but it's kind of weird for him. He probably hasn't played drums in like 2 months.
Oh, that sucks. Hope he's got some pots and pans.
Yeah. I miss talking shit with my family, with my Voyager peeps.
Yeah. Well, eventually we'll be back, and that leads me into the conclusion for today. Is there just anything with Voyager, obviously thanks to a virus that I prefer not to name because I don't want to give it any promotion. But is there just anything with Voyager that you would like to promote for Colors in the Sun record cycle? Like, can we maybe be seeing you guys return to the States fairly soon when all this shit is behind us?
Yeah, well, sadly, my wife and I were going to be actually going to the States ourselves for a holiday. That got canned. Damn. No touring news per se in terms of international stuff. We had a tour planned. Actually, I think we were supposed to be playing in Adelaide kind of tomorrow, before all of this stuff happened. So no, nothing. Unfortunately, nothing until next year touring wise. But we do have. We will be releasing a new vinyl of Ghost Mile. Approximately the May 27th. So there'll be some bonus kind of goodies to come with that as well. So to anyone interested in vinyl, make sure you keep an eye out for that around that time.
Awesome.
By a season of mist. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Alex, for your time today. I appreciate it. Everybody, we are here with Alex of Voyager, Colors in the Sun, out now on Season of Mist. Be sure to pick that up. Ghost Smile coming out on vinyl May 27th. Be sure to pick that up, and we'll see you next time on Heavy New York.